It gives me pleasure actually today to be with you, and I am going to talk about a very tough topic. Okay, it's about wars in the Old Testament. This topic elicit actually many questions, which about God Himself, and is there any violence in the Bible, and how God, who we know very well that He is the loving God, how He orders to kill people. At the same time, also, there is certain attacks to the Bible about that the Bible encourages violence, and we are as Christians as well are encouraging violence. So we will go through the topic, and I put the title actually as highlights because we will not be able to cover all the points today, but we will try to go through highlights on the topic. Okay, so can you see the slides well? Is it clear?
Yes, you can.
Yes, yeah. Okay. So we will go first through two arguments. So the first argument says, number one, any act that God commands us to perform is morally permissible. Two, the Bible reveals to us many of the acts that God commands us to perform, and it is morally impermissible for anyone to commit acts that violate principle one, that violate the moral principles God teaches us. And so consequently, the Bible tells us that God commands us to perform acts that violate moral principle. This is the first argument. Second argument, it is about our Christian condemnation to genocide. So saying that Christians condemned genocide, and Yahweh command to kill the Canaanites was an act of divine genocide. Therefore, Christians should condemn Yahweh for commanding genocide. Okay, so we'll go through the topic, and we have many questions actually to ask. Does the Bible command the killing of innocent people? Does the Bible claim that God command extermination of virtually everyone in Canaan? Why did God use Israel to do this? And why was this favoritism in the side of Israel? Did God use the same method with any other nations or not? So all are very important and logic questions. So let's go to the first point. Does the Bible command the killing of innocent people? First of all, we should say that the orders about the wars in the Old Testament, it were occasional versus general commands, okay? So if we do an examination of the commands God gave to Joshua, for example, in the book of Joshua, suggest that they are isolated commands for particular occasion. Let's look together. But of the cities of these people, which the Lord your God gives as an inheritance, you shall let nothing that breathes remain alive. So the order is limited to the cities the Lord will give to people as an inheritance, nothing outside it, as we will see now. Similarly, in the Torah, God prohibited Israel from conquering other neighboring nations such as Moab, Ammon, and Edom. So we'll see in Deuteronomy saying, and command the people saying, you are about to pass through the territory of your brethren, the descendants of Esau, who live in Seir, and they will be afraid of you. Therefore, watch yourselves carefully. Don't meddle with them, for I will not give you any of their land. No, not so much as 1 footstep, because I have given Mount Seir to Esau as possession. So as you can see, he prevented them from attacking sons of Esau, because he said clearly, for I will not give you any of their land. So the orders are specific to this land. And even I will not give you so much as 1 footstep. And the same also when he spoke in Deuteronomy 2:9 as well, then the Lord said to me, don't harass Moab. So it is about Moab, not about Ammon. About sons of Esau. So here it's talking about Moab. Nor contend with them in battle, for I will not give you any of their land as possession, because I have given her to the descendants of Lot as possession. So here he is talking clearly that the order is limited to certain piece of land, and even the lands around, they are not permitted to attack. Okay? So we understand that God's commandment was specific to certain piece of land and nations, and not a universal order for all ages. Okay? And the good thing about this map, actually, it is land of Canaan at the time of Joshua. If we look up there, can you see the land of the Hittites? As you can see, the land of the Hittites is extended outside the boundaries. So they expelled them. So the duty of the Israelites were to expel them to beyond the boundaries. But after they went beyond the boundaries, they will not attack them. Okay, so this is the first thing to understand about the commandments. It was limited to certain piece of land. But also still the question, why such piece of land? And what is the things which justify that Israel go to people, to their land, expel them, drive them out from their lands? And another important question, if you say that the Canaanites were bad people, so where is the long suffering of God? So God taught us in the Bible that he has long suffering for years and years. So let's go to the story from the start. Does the Bible portray the Canaanites as innocent? Actually, the Bible, however, doesn't portray the Canaanites in general as innocent of any serious wrongdoing. In the book of Genesis, God gave Abraham and his descendant legal title to the land of Canaan. So actually, it started from the time of Abraham, about 400 years before the exodus of the Israelites from the land of Egypt, because roughly Abraham lived about 2,000 years before Christ, Moses roughly 1,500 years, David 1,000 years. So it is easy to move by 500 years to memorize them. So when God made his covenant with Abraham, as we see in the verses in Genesis 15, 13, 16, and he said to Abraham, you must surely know that your seed shall be stranger in a land, not theirs. This is the land of Egypt, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. 400 years. And this is what happened. They stayed in Egypt about 400 years. And also I will judge that nation whom they shall serve. And afterward they shall come out with great substance, which is the Exodus. And you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried in a good old age. But in the fourth generation they shall come here again. So it is the land of Canaan. For the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. Okay, so it's very strange actually. So in this promise, God promised Abraham with three promises actually. With the land, with a son, a seed, and also with blessings. So he had the blessings. He had the son after 25 years, because when God called Abraham, his age was 75 years, which is very interesting. Abraham was 75 years, Moses was 80 years when God called him. So 75 years, he gave him Isaac when his age was 100 years. So he had the son after 25 years, but he didn't get the land despite the legal title for the land for more than 400 years. And he told him, you will stay as a stranger in this land, okay, as a foreigner, but your sons, your seeds will come after 400 years to possess it. And we should ask here why God didn't give the land straight away to Abraham at the time. And I think the answer is clear, because he mentions here at the last verse that in the fourth generation they shall come here again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. So at that time, for God to give the land to Abraham, he should drive out the Amorites. At that time, their sins didn't deserve to expel them from the land. So God gave them a chance, and this chance was very long time. It was 400 years. It expresses the long suffering of God to leave people in the land with their sins for 400 years before driving them out. Okay? So in Leviticus 18, it gives us most exhaustive list of the wickedness of people of the land. Okay, it is incest, adultery, bestiality, which is practicing sex with animals, ritual prostitution, which is practicing sex during the worshiping their gods, homosexual acts, and most significantly, which God condemned heavily, is child sacrifice. Okay, and as we can see in this portrait, this is their god Moloch, and here, and usually this god had the head of a bull and the body of human with extended hands, and they used to put, as you can see, the child in the hands of Moloch, while there is a hole in his abdomen. They fill it with wood and the fire, okay? And all the body is made from iron. And so when they put the hand, and with the high voice of drums to hide the crying of this infant or child, okay, they offer their children as sacrifice. It is actually horrible thing, which are sins against humanity. And later on, actually, it was mentioned in the books of the Bible, like in Deuteronomy 9:4-5, that Israel will drive the nations out because of their wickedness. This is the reason, actually. And I want to mention very important point, that when God expelled them, this was not because they were not worshiping God. No, this was not the cause, because many nations shared with them this in the world at the time. It was actually the start point of God to reveal himself through selecting one person, Abraham, and then selecting one family, the family of Jacob and his sons, and then to make a nation, and from this nation he will come incarnate, and his knowledge and will be revealed to the whole world. So many nations around them didn't know our real God. So this was not the cause of punishment, but actually the cause of punishment was because of their sins, as we will see in the next slide, their incest, their adultery, bestiality, and especially the ritual prostitution, which is the same thing St. Paul faced in Corinth in the temple of Aphrodite. If we read here together, and if you can see the circle, because it will show us the cause, the real cause, completely destroy them. The Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, okay? As the Lord your God has commanded you, otherwise they will teach you to follow all the detestable things they do in worshiping their gods. And you will sin against the Lord your God. So God here condemned their sexual practice during worshiping their gods and offering their sons as sacrifice, and all the abominations they are doing in the land. Also, he mentioned this, They will turn your children away from following me to serve other gods. They will be in a snare. Exodus is explicit actually. They must not remain in your land, or else they will make you sin against me. If you worship their gods, it will be a snare for you. And additionally, he said in Exodus, don't make a treaty with the inhabitants of the land, or else when they prostitute themselves with their gods, okay, so it is, they defiled everything, even their worship is defiled, and sacrifice to their gods, and they will invite you, and you will eat their sacrifices. Then you will take some of their daughters as brides for your sons. The daughters will prostitute themselves with their gods and cause your sons to prostitute themselves with their gods. So it is very clear that they did everything God hated. And this is prohibited because in worshipping their gods, they do all kinds of detestable things the Lord hates. This is another place in Deuteronomy 12. They even burn their sons and daughters in fire as sacrifices to their gods. And actually, some scholars say that when God ordered Abraham to take his son Isaac to the Moriah to offer him as a sacrifice, it was to teach him that God doesn't like human sacrifice, and he should not do like the Canaanites and offer his son. So he prevented him from killing his son. So now we understand that the people of Canaan were not actually innocent people, but they committed all types of sins and abomination, and they defiled all the land. Even God said to the Israelites that when you go destruct their altars, you will find altars under every green tree. And some people also explains when God ordered to kill even the animals because of the bad sexual practice they had with the animals. So they spoiled actually everything. And here is a very important question. Do you need God to give blind eye and to stay silent in front of all the horrible anti-humanity acts of these nations? So what do you expect God to do to such nations? This is a very, very important question, because I assume that atheists would criticize God if he did nothing and no action for those people, and they will say, okay, he is a weak God. He sees a wicked people doing this and burns their sons, and he didn't prevent them. And when God had an action against them, they're also criticizing them. So they will criticize God in both situations. But there is another important question we should ask. Now we understand that God decided to destroy such nations and expel them and drive them out of the land because of their horrible sins and horrible sexual practices and abomination. So there is a very important question. Did God use the same method with other nations? Or it was some favoritism towards Israel to expel the people? Actually, if we read the Bible carefully, we will find the answer. So if we read here in Deuteronomy chapter 2, between verses 17 to 23, that the Lord spoke to me saying, this day you are to cross over at Ar, come near the people of Ammon. So Ar was the city of Ammon. Don't harass them or meddle with them, as we mentioned, for I will give you any of the land of the people of Ammon as a possession, because I have given it to the descendants of Lot as a possession. It's okay, we agree, we mentioned this, okay. And he continues in verse 20, that was all regarded as the land of giants, or the land of Rephaites. Okay, so land of giants, it was the land of Ammon actually, So it was called the land of giants. Giants formerly dwelt there, but the Ammonites called them Zamzaman, a people as great and numerous and tall as the Anakim. This is a description of the giants. But the Lord destroyed them before them, and they dispossessed them and dwelt in their place. Okay, so the Lord destroyed the giants who dwelt in the land of the Ammonites, and he gave the Ammonites, who are the descendants of Lot, their land. It is the same scenario. Okay, and also in verse 22, just as he had done for the descendants of Esau. So what happened to the descendants of Esau who dwelt in Seir? When he destroyed the Horites from before them, they dispossessed them and dwelt. Okay, so and God implemented the same scenario to make the sons of Esau destroy the Horites and expel them and possess their land. And the Avim who dwelt in villages as far as Gaza. The Caphtorim who came from Caphtor. Caphtorim came from Caphtor. Caphtor, it is the island of Crete in the Mediterranean, okay? And it is the origin of the Philistines who came and they built five cities, okay? And even the name Palestine, it is from the Palestine, which is the Mediterranean basin, because this is their origin, okay? So the Caphtorim, who came from Caphtor, from Crete, destroyed them and dwelt in their place. Okay, so it is a repetitive scenario. It was the policy of God at that time, is to make a nation, drive out a nation from the land and possess its land. So it is not new. So it was God's policy at that time. And if we read in Amos 9, verses 7 and 8, did I not bring up Israel from the land of Egypt, the Philistines from Caphtor, and the Syrians from Kir? So he is adding as well another nation, Syrian. So until now, 5 nations, Israel, Syrian, and if we return back, we will find Ammonites, we'll find sons of Esau, and Caphtorim. So 5 nations. The same principle happened. Did I not bring up Israel from the land of Egypt, the Philistines from Caphtor, and the Syrians from Kir? Behold, the eyes of the Lord God are on the sinful kingdom, and I will destroy it from the face of the earth. So it was policy of God at this time. Okay? And it was actually one law without bias. So what God did to the Canaanites, he did the same to the sons of Israel. Okay? Because later on, when Israel disobeys God and allows Canaanites to continue to live among them, as we will see later on, the corruptive and seductive power of Canaanite sin results in what we can call canonization of Israel. Subsequently, God sent prophets who tried to bring them back, but they didn't. So at the end, God applied the same principle, and he drove out Israel in the exile, the Assyrian and Babylonian exile, and he took them from the land. So he applied the same principle. Because what happened? The Israelites worshipped the Canaanite gods. They did evil. They had male shrine prostitutes, committed acts of lewdness, adultery, and incest. And even Solomon himself set up an altar to Molech. And instead of repenting, actually, when things went badly, they concluded that their misfortune was because they stopped burning incense to the Queen of Heaven, Ishtar. And so that Lord said to Israel, you are now like Sodom to me, as mentioned in Jeremiah. In short, Israel was canonized. Okay? And here we will find the law that God put to them. It was mentioned in Deuteronomy 8. And you shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you power and gives you wealth, that he may establish his covenant, which he swore to your fathers, as it is this day. Then it shall be, if you by any means forget the Lord your God, and follow other gods, and serve them and worship them, I testify against you this day, that you shall surely perish, as the nations which the Lord destroys before you. So you shall perish, because you would not be obedient to the voice of the Lord your God. So here I should stop and ask, what is the favoritism of the ethnicity? What is genocide? It is completely not about ethnicity or genocide. It is about the law of God, that God put a law and people destructed this law, and this is his judgment coming on them. He used Israel first to implement this judgment, but later on, when Israel fell in the same pit as other nations and became like them, he drove them out in the Assyrian and Babylonian exile. It is the same measure God applies. And this is what happened actually. In year 722, the North Kingdom was carried in the captivity to Assyria. And later on, 586, the Southern Kingdom carried in the exile, the Babylonian exile. Okay, so the same principle happened. God drove them out from the land. And actually, as you know, when the kingdom was divided into two kingdoms, the North Kingdom and Southern Kingdom, 20 kings reigned over the North Kingdom and 20 over the South Kingdom. The number of kings who worshipped God in the North Kingdom was 0. The number of kings who worshipped God in the Southern Kingdom, they were 8. And some scholars say that the North Kingdom went into the exile earlier, 722, before Christ, because the North Kingdom sustained a bit to 586 because of the good kings. So they had more chance. But end of the day, they went. It didn't stop actually at this point. And in Luke 20, we listen to our Lord Jesus Christ telling them the parable of the tenants and the vineyard. And when servants sent to the tenants of the vineyard, but had been mistreated, and so the owner of the vineyard sent his son, but the tenants killed the son. So Jesus then warned, and what then will be the owner of the vineyard to do to them? He will come and kill those tenants and give the vineyard to others. And what happened actually in the year 70 AD, when Titus, the Roman leader, sieged Jerusalem and destructed it and destructed the temple, and he didn't leave a stone over stone. And after this, which happened, the Israelites drove out again from the land for almost 1900 years. And for about 1900 years, there was nothing called Israel on the map until 1948 when they returned again. So God applied the same principle. Can we say now it is about ethnicity or about genocide? Where is the genocide? The Israelites, they drank the same cup which they gave to people. And actually, when you ask why God used Israel to do this to the nations, so why, for example, God didn't bring a flood or brimstone or fire from heaven on such nations, and then the people of Israel entered smoothly into the land? Actually, he left them to do this punishment by their hands. in order that they realize that when they do it in the future, the same will happen to them. And actually, this is what happened. So if we take home message from this first part of the talk, so in Leviticus 18, as we said, and elsewhere in different parts of the Bible, and not only the Bible and the history as well, the Bible reveals that God punished the Canaanites for specific grievous evils. Also, this wasn't the entire destruction of a race, as God didn't order that every Canaanite be killed. We will see later on what is the meaning of this, but only those who lived within specific geographical boundaries. As we mentioned, it is the people who are inside the territories of the land, okay? Canaanite tribes, especially the Hittites, as we mentioned, greatly exceeded the boundaries that Israel was told to conquer. And since, as we'll see, he punished Israel when they committed the same sins that happened to the Canaanites, and so it wasn't a genocide, but capital punishment. When God commanded Israel to do to the Canaanites, it wasn't genocide, it was God's judgment. In both testaments, we see God hates sin and will punish it. So this is the first point. The second part, which we need to start now, is it actually about ethnicity or about obedience? So God's commandments against the Canaanites were because of their sins, not because of their ethnicity. Similarly, there are hints in the text that Canaanites who rejected that kind of practices were to be spared. And actually, I will not go far. I will stick to the text of the book, the most famous book they usually attack for the wars of the Old Testament, which is the book of Joshua. And we will look actually at two examples, two big examples. So in the Battle of Jericho, Rahab, the Canaanite innkeeper, the harlot, is explicitly excluded from the command to destroy the city, okay? And St. Paul in Hebrews actually praised her faith, and he said, by faith, Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. Actually, what happened, Rahab, she is a Canaanite. According to God's order, she should perish. But what happened? Rahab believed in God and she accepted the spies and she carried the responsibility. She exposed herself to the risk and she told them clearly, we heard about what God did with you, crossing the Red Sea, his care with you in the desert, and he is the true God. And so she believed in God. And as we know, the rest of the story, when they ordered her to put the red robe in the window, and finally she saved. But there is another one, actually, who is an Israelite, and he should possess the land, but he perished. This man is Achan, son of Carmi. We know this story. It is in the following chapter after Jericho. And because of what Achan did, they lost the battle against Ai. And he stole clothes and silver and things, and he perished. Is it ethnicity or obedience to God? Rahab, the Canaanite, became one of the grandmothers, grandmother of our Lord Jesus Christ. And we will find this in the genealogy in the first chapter of Matthew. But Achan, the man, the Israelite man, who is also a fighter with them in the army, who assumed to possess the land and take the land, perished. Why? Because of disobedience. So it is a matter of obedience and disobedience to God rather than ethnicity. And also, there is further point here regarding the Shechemites. They are included in Israel's renewal ceremony mentioned at the end of Joshua. Then all Israel, with their elders and officers and judges, stood on their side of the ark, the stranger, as well as who was born among them. Please notice the word stranger. At Shechem, those who heard the law being read included not only the assembly of Israel, but also the strangers who were living among them. Who are the strangers who are living among them? They are the people, the Canaanites, who accepted God and showed obedience and belief in God. Okay, so can you understand now that it is not about ethnicity, it was about obedience to God. So does the Bible state that Joshua exterminated everyone in Canaan? This is actually a very, very tricky point we need to focus on and understand it. So in chapters 7 to 11, it states that Joshua went through the cities of the southern and northern Canaan and put all the inhabitants to the sword, left no survivors, and destroyed everything that breathed in the entire land. Alongside these general claims, the text identifies several specific places and cities where Joshua put all the inhabitants to the sword and left no survivor. So, like Hebron, Deber, Hill Country, the Negev, and the Western foothills. So, the Bible mentions that in such places, he left no survivors at all. And in Joshua 11:23 finishes like this. So Joshua took the entire land, in keeping with all that the Lord had told Moses. Joshua then gave it as an inheritance to Israel, according to the tribal allotment. After this, the land had rest from war. It's okay. So we understand from the text that Joshua left no survivors, he finished the job, and the land had rest. Okay. But after one chapter or so later, God said to Joshua, it is chapter 13, and if you look at the verse we read, it was 11:23. So the Lord said to him, you have become old, getting on in years, but a great deal of the land remains to be possessed. Okay, how can we reconcile this? So according to what mentioned in Joshua 11, that Joshua gives them an inheritance and all things done, and the land had rest. And here chapter 13 saying that you have become old, getting on in years, and but in general, there is a lot of the land remains to be possessed. And in the next 5 chapters, it is stressed repeatedly that the land was not yet conquered, and the Canaanites were in fact not literally wiped out. Sorry, not literally wiped out. And he is saying the Canaanites are said to be occupying the Negev, in the hill country, in Deber, in Hebron, and in the western foothills, which are the same places mentioned that he left no survivors, often in significant numbers and strength. And it finishes with the angel of the Lord at Bochim, rebuking them for failing to drive the inhabitants out. If one reads the whole narrative as a consequence, so there will be some difficulty actually. And if we look at the next figure, so this figure expressing the start of the book of Judges. So this is after the life of Joshua, telling us about the cities and nations left in Canaan and the tribes responsible for defeating them. Oh, there is still places in Canaan, and we need to possess the places and the land and to get such cities. And so for Asher, for tribe of Manasseh, tribe of Dan, tribe of Zebulun, Naphtali, Ephraim, and so on. So in total, 20 cities remaining and 8 nations. So this is a bit strange. Also, when you read about Samuel and Saul, so the key passage for the order of Samuel to Saul commands Saul to strike Amalek and utterly destroy all that he has, and do not spare him, but put to death both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. And actually, the words in Hebrew, strike Naka, destroy Haram, and do not spare, spare means Hamal. So the text goes as well that the Amalekites were all wiped out. So Saul defeated the Amalekites from Havilah as you go to Shur, which is east of Egypt. He captured Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive and utterly destroyed. It is the same word, Haran, all the people with the edge of the sword. But Saul and the people spared Hamal, Agag, and the pest of the sheep, the oxen, the failings, and this was a problem with Samuel. And later on, when Samuel was angry with him, so he killed Agag, the king. So there is tendency for many scholars to explain the Hebrew words haram, which means destroy, to defeat or struck, okay, rather than it is killing. So they explain it as driving out people from the land, because actually later on the people were still in the land, okay? And the reason for this is because also the same story happens here, that after a few years with David, okay, so if we look here, so this happened in 1 Samuel 15. If we look at 1 Samuel 27, we will find still the Amalekites still in the land. They were not wiped out completely. David and his men went up and raided the Geshurites and the Girgisites and the Amalekites. The Amalekites are still in the land. From ancient times, they had been the inhabitants of the region through Shur as far as the land of Egypt, the same description of the geographical area. Whenever David attacked the land, he did not leave a single person alive, either man or woman, but the total flocks. So they explain that the meaning of haram is to defeat or strike or drive out. And also there is another issue here, that they say that the rhetorical and the manner of writing of that age is called hagiographic hyperbole, which means that they usually used to amplify things in the writing. Don't forget that God used our human manner in writing the Bible. So in the battle, there is no one except us and them. And so we say that we destructed them completely. We wiped them out from the land. So it is a certain expressions to express the victory and how this victory happens. They call it hyperbole. So our question now, does God own the earth? Yes, God he is the owner of the earth. And if you believe in God, you should believe in God, who is the omnipotent, omniscient, and he is the owner of the whole earth. Does God put moral laws? Yes, God put moral laws. Does God has the right to punish people who break the moral laws? Of course, because how can we imagine a weak God who can't punish or who can't restore the justice in the land? Because one of the things which give people hope, usually, that there is a God who will restore our rights from powerful people and from wicked people. So if you don't have such God, so that is actually a big misery and a disappointment if God is not able to restore justice in the land, and he is not able to stop people who are doing their sins and anti-human acts, to stop them and stop their evils. Can you imagine God who is not able to punish the wicked? I think it is one of the atheists' accusations against certain things in the life of our Lord Jesus Christ, saying that he was weak in this position. So, of course, they will not agree with this. Okay? So, if we take home message 2, so when we bring together the threads of the above discussion, several things are evident. First, God does not in the Bible command us to engage in acts that violate. The Bible records command to a specific people for a specific time, not a general command to all people. It was God's policy at that time, and it happened with many nations, as we mentioned, about 5 nations, not only with the people of Israel. So it doesn't express anything about ethnicity or about genocide. Second, it portrays the Canaanites as guilty of serious crimes and suggests that people who turned from these crimes could be saved, like what happened with Rahab and the people we mentioned in Shechem. Third, the command is typically phrased not in terms of extermination, but in the terms of driving out the occupants. Fourth, while some accounts talk of putting all the inhabitants to death with the sword and leaving alive nothing that breathes, the evidence suggests that these are highly hyperbolic hagiographic accounts. Clearly, a biblical theist can reject the argument 4, that is, rightly rejects the conclusion that God commands us to mercilessly kill men, women, and children who have committed no serious wrong. Thank you.